Welcome everyone. I'm excited to say that we have folks joining us from really all over the world, which is exciting to see. Representation from France, Finland, United Arab Emirates, folks from the US, South Africa, Israel, and Brazil, to name a few. Just to let everyone know, there are 3 attachments associated with this webinar, including our deck and also some research that we used to augment our discussion today. So feel free to download those attachments at your convenience. Perfect. Welcome to the Jedox webinar, Integrating ESG into FP&A to Achieve Compliance and Create Value. So the agenda for today, we'll start by looking a few years into the future actually at where ESG is going, which really helps us orient our behavior and our thinking and our priorities around ESG here and now today. After that, we'll explore the role that FP&A teams are playing in ESG today and how those roles are evolving, and also how FP&A teams are really in a unique position to add value, not only in ESG compliance and reporting, but also in making ESG goals actually happen. Next, we'll show you how Jedox can support ESG planning and reporting. And finally, we'll close out with by touching on the impact of ESG on financial planning and also value creation. Today's conversation will be anchored by my 2 colleagues. Dr. John Philipp Menke, who's our principal value architect. He sits in Freiburg, Germany. And also Wolfgang von Loper, who's a consultant in our solution advisory practice. He sits in Cape Town. Jackie will also be joining us. She sits in our Freiburg office and will be here to help support Q&A because she is quite the expert on Jedox. If I were to pick an anchor point for today's discussion and give you some food for thought, as we say in the US at least, it's really that FP&A teams are uniquely positioned to shepherd ESG from aspiration to accountability. And I want to get started with just a quick poll question just to see and better understand where everyone's at. And really, it's better understanding where your organization falls on the spectrum of sort of compliance to corporate citizenship. And there are really 4 categories here. We have the minimalists, which are companies who are really just getting started on their ESG journey, don't really know where to begin. It's really a blank slate. The pragmatic folks are oriented to risk rather than opportunity. And they may have a sustainability report, perhaps have net zero goals, but are not exactly mature in their ESG reporting. More strategic organizations really see both opportunity and risks in ESG. They have mature disclosure, reporting, science-based targets, and really their ESG is integrated with their business and financial strategy. And lastly, we have the trailblazing organizations who are the most mature on their journey. And these are organizations in which ESG is really core to their purpose, to their strategy, and also incorporated into their services and products. We may have integrated financial and non-financial reporting in these trailblazing organizations. And ESG, really the hallmark of these organizations is that ESG is really integrated throughout the organization. So let's go ahead and launch the poll and see where everyone's at. Perfect. All right, collecting responses here. So it looks like most folks are in that minimalistic or pragmatic category, which makes sense. You're here, you're evaluating the role that you need to play in ESG, what your organization needs to do moving forward, how you can start planning, reporting, etc. And about 1/3 of you are in that strategic phase where you've been reporting in ESG for a decade or so, you're pretty advanced, but you still see some opportunities to be better, do better, and increase and really optimize your processes. Awesome, very exciting to see. Great. With that, I will hand the conversation over to JP to to take us through the next section. And JP, you should have access now.
Thank you very much. So first questions first. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. So what I'm trying to do with you now is taking a look ahead into 2030, mainly using some ideas KPMG came up with in their predictions for the future with regards to ESG. And to start a little bit with the motivation, one aspect is really that 65% of international deal makers will be considering ESG for their investments and for their M&A decisions. So we've seen this with your answers already. For most of you, it's the beginning of the journey. It's maybe even just a tick box exercise to some extent. Yet, nevertheless, it will become more important, taking a look at those 30% that mentioned that it's already starting to get or already is strategic. So what does this mean in terms of where will we be in 2030? When we take a look at the E, so spelling out the letters, carbon neutral will no longer be the North Star. Carbon negative will be the North Star in 2030, meaning that a lot of companies, hopefully, likely, will already have achieved the first step of trying to be neutral. So, and that's what we already see for companies taking a long-term projection, really thinking about this negative already, especially when it comes to the sustainability assurance, which really is the end-to-end understanding of what impact does what I'm doing within my company, within my organization, have on the environment ultimately. This is just two aspects that will be a given in the future as of KPMG. Next thing, the social part. It's really, again, what we currently start in terms of, let's say, pay gap aspects and other social aspects and ideas will be a demonstrated commitment rather than an initiative that is starting or on its journey. So 7 years of time will show that within the, specifically within the social area, this aspect of co-opetition will be strongly emphasized, meaning that, for example, currently a lot of competition is more or less the idea of marketing concepts, of approaching the market together and at the same time being a competitor in maybe parts of the product portfolio or in other regions, things like that. But meaning that competition will take place in terms of understanding where, even with your competitors, you have to align on specific standards and at the same time still challenge the market in terms of war for talents, for example. So really having those two aspects and managing them, which means that the whole bunch of corporate bodies will focus on the responsibility within the society much stronger, which ultimately leads to, and already is leading to, new C-suite roles. And the thing is, and if you compare this initiative and these concepts a little bit to, and that's one of my historical backgrounds personally, risk management, for example. In the beginning, risk management was a hype due to some disruptions in specific markets and industries, and this hype stopped to be a specific hype throughout the whole market at some point in time. Nevertheless, a lot of job roles are still there, and those job roles are especially still there where it's important and very important for the industry, especially in the case of risk management, for example, financial services industry, where the regulation is still and will still be very high. Nevertheless, we see with ESG that there are other industries, more supply chain focused industries, more industries with, again, a lot of people involved in there. Those C-suite attention will rise and will stay. That's what we see and what we can predict as well. Next thing is, again, how do we shape the future? How do we shape the future of ESG? This is, as of today, not standardized, at least not standardized at a global level. Nevertheless, we can see a lot of convergence towards specific standards, towards specific frameworks and ratings and rating agencies. There are existing players that try to harmonize this within their frameworks, International Accounting Standards Board, for example, but there are initiatives already of convergence. For example, when you take a look at one of the most important ones, the ISSB, for example, which went through some kind of transformation itself within the organization already. So ultimately, and to make a point from us as a vendor's perspective, the thing that should stick with this slide and within your mind should be that there will be, for a long time, a changing regulatory environment when it comes to ESG demands. And therefore, you will need an adaptable ESG solution that can not only be part of a reporting exercise, but also needs to be, and that's again this future perspective, part of the planning and forecasting exercises and processes as well. And last but not least, nothing new here, the explosion of data, and in this case, ESG data. You already see this within the organizations, and that's actually part of what we will be addressing within our demo later on. We see two different aspects of data. The one is already in your systems, and you need to automate getting it into the ESG solution. For example, the social data to some extent is much easier already in some HR systems, things like that. The other part of data is not that automatically integrated. It's those things that are to some extent today and most likely in the future still very manual to process and to gather. So combining those different sets of data is one thing. The next thing, and this is again relating a little bit to the compliance part, is really how to manage the processes and the controls in place to be able and auditable in terms of ESG. So I think you've already heard a lot of buzzwords that sound very familiar to finance teams, and that's actually what we are trying to position here, that the finance teams are really in this unique spot of managing and leading the ESG initiative and initiatives. So this is a survey done by EY, and they foresee a strong growing demand and efforts within the financial teams, throughout the next year, next 18 months. And this is a little bit contradicted by where does the data currently reside? Where does the exercise reside? Where do the processes currently reside, and who owns them ultimately? And only 37% really say it's us, it's the finance department owning this, where other functions are leading as well. So one of the things I would like to mention is, and this relates back to then the data and the information at hand, 60% of companies really say that the ESG data live in a patchwork of software applications. So that's the one aspect, that it's a zoo of tools out there. And guess what? One of the tools that is very predominant is Excel. So maybe one or two people of you from the finance department have heard of Excel. It's the solution to everything. Is it? Well, our point is a little bit different, and we just want to understand a little bit, where are you currently in terms of ESG reporting? So maybe we can open the poll. The idea is really, sorry, I can open the poll myself. No, I can't. Can you please open poll for me?
It is open, JP. I think when you're in presenter mode,
so I can't see it. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's all good. I'm looking at the results now. We've got about 45%, almost half the folks here voting. Give it another minute. Perfect. So it looks like people are definitely interested in that sort of single place where all their ESG data and reporting can be stored and managed, and really interested in that one source of truth. And it looks like some folks are still struggling with the integration. So maybe they have the data in 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 different systems, but perhaps it's not integrated with the financial data. And it looks like a small percentage of folks are quite mature and already have their ESG data integrated with their financial data. Bravo. Wonderful to see. Thank you so much, everyone, for voting. And I will go ahead and that's perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, and actually, this is what we are perceiving in the market as well. Those companies leading the ESG wave are typically those where the finance department is leading and is taking up this stick or this candle, this torch, and just light it up as part of their KPI system already in place. And to quote someone that never stated this quote, it's attributed to Peter Drucker, but actually it seems he has never said it. What gets measured gets, I know, done, but in this case, managed. The thing is, we are talking about KPIs. We're talking about managing processes, managing controls. And speaking of this, what gets measured gets done. The critic about this statement is you definitely have to first think of the right set of KPIs and the right set of goals before you want to start managing something. And so before you can succeed, you just don't select a specific set of KPIs, but you define as your organization, what do I want to achieve based on ESG KPIs? And in this case, the next step would then be improve this, and improve this not just from an ESG perspective, but from a your corporate perspective. And how can you actually achieve this? Leading by example within the finance department with the FP&A teams. And that's really our aspiration, from you start to pick up this torch to really be accountable for what's happening. And the thing is, as we already see in the market and with existing customers and prospects we are currently talking to, it clearly already has a lot of financial impact. For example, one customer we are currently talking to is already doing financial processes with Jedox. They stated that they have a 3-digit million euro number of carbon penalties they now currently have to pay so this is quite large number you can address with ESG. And the thing is, you want to address this just from a ESG high level. I have to adhere to a specific external number perspective in terms of the costs, or do I want to really understand where do the costs reside? How can I change them, and maybe why should I change them? And this is actually where the finance department really comes into this role of helping other parts of the organization as a business partner to understand where they currently stand and where they can or should be heading, using all those analytical rigor and all those understanding of how specific decisions will impact your financials. Ultimately, again, being one of the digital pioneers within the organization. And that's what we already saw and are still seeing, is that the finance department has always been a digital pioneer. And the one aspect where this is, again, very important, where a lot of companies are currently really accelerating and getting to speed, is really thinking in terms of scenarios. Because this is so crucial to shaping the new world of financial leadership, that setting scenarios that not only take the next 3 years into account, but maybe the next 7, 17, 27 years into account. We see our customers doing this already by just extrapolating what they already see and attaching this set of ESG KPIs to their existing set of KPIs. So it's all capabilities that are already there within the finance department. And that's where we as Jedox already have a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge, and where we can help as well. So that's the idea of showing you a little bit how we can do this. So I'd like to hand over to Wolfgang.
Yeah, thank you, JP. Just to confirm, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Cool, wonderful. Okay, good. Yes, guys, I'm looking forward to taking you through the practical way of how we solve the problem. And I would really like to put yourself into the shoes, or yeah, basically what I'm going to do next is show you in the next few minutes, how can you become a trailblazer in this space. But ultimately, we really need to be clear about ESG. It is a roadmap. Yes, this accelerator that we have here, or what I'm going to show you, is part of what we call our accelerator pack. It gets you going quickly. It's got all the best practice and standards built into it, so that from data collection to workflows, integrations and models, so that you can literally get going quickly. The conversions are all done for you, but the important thing also is that you need to understand for yourselves it is, in practical terms, a roadmap for you to embark on. Okay, I see now I haven't got my camera on. Let me just switch my camera on. There we go. It is a roadmap for you to go into in the next few years, and it will take some time, and regulations will change over time. So also will your reporting and your compliance and your ESG environment. And that's why you are looking for a flexible tool. And what I'm going to show you here today is a flexible and adaptable tool, because that, by the very nature, is what Jedox is about, being adaptable and flexible and integratable. So I'd like to put yourself into the mindset of that you are in the shoes now of a company that wants to and has already sort of started going ESG and is recording some data, and they operationally struggling to collect the data from multiple different sources of information, digital information, manual logged information. Then tactically, they struggle to prepare and analyze the data, and ensuring that they are compliant with, for example, the greenhouse gas protocols, the Task Force on Climate-related Financial Disclosures, United Nations Global Compact, US Executive Order. Those are all sort of bodies that will sort of have a look into ESG and your company all our companies in future more and more, they tactically struggle to be compliant there, and ultimately also strategically struggle to align the business with the stakeholders that make up the customers, employees, and ultimately also make the shareholders happy. So if these are sort of some of the issues that you already might have or see yourself you might be having in future, the more you go into ESG, then these next 15 minutes will be something, 15, 20 minutes will be something for you to see. And yeah, basically, yeah, let's dive in and start. What you will see here now on the start screen is basically also the login screen. So I'm Wolfgang, I'm the user, I log in, and with my login, I get to see my own login screen. It's got some messages from colleagues here on top that I got a few days ago or a few hours maybe even ago. So I've got my messages there, but importantly, I also have the most important KPIs related to me and my position and my MBOs and my bonuses and whatnot. But the important thing is here, these are financial numbers in my case, but I've also got on the right-hand side tasks. These are mostly financial tasks because in this example demo here, I'm sort of an financial controller, but you can see here next to cost center, budgeting, and sales month end close, I've actually also got the gathering of ESG actual data for July 22 as an open task. And we would actually really like to dive in and see what's happening there. And if we open ourselves into that environment of logging that data, what we have here, for example, is an environmental dashboard. We also have a social dashboard and ultimately also a governance dashboard, the ESG, the 3 big information KPI dashboards. These dashboards are very adaptable. You will design them in the way you would like to see them. Probably you would start off using our accelerator pack with these as example KPIs to grow into. These are best practice KPIs. You can filter here into the different time periods and you get to see over the total group your dashboard, or you can drill right down into an individual company or drill and compare your actual values against your target. And if you set some strategic long-term goals, you can put, say, for example, 2030, you can compare your actuals not only to the targets of the year, but also to the long-term strategic goals that you've set yourself. And yeah, it basically gives you quick access out of the box best practice on governance and compliance, in particular for this dashboard. And obviously the same accounts in form of filtering on the social and environmental. And now what this means for you is that you gain a complete overview of your total ESG impact of your entire business or even individual businesses, literally in minutes and live with real data. And some of the data we collect here is in real time, and you will see that in the next few minutes how we do collect this data in real time. That's really what this demo here is all about. And here we've got our environmental dashboard now in this case. We've got it filtered here. We've got our emissions measurement, we've got our energy consumption, we've got our waste production and water withdrawal and water use down here. We'll be planning and adding a few values in here and aggregating data and collecting data in the next few minutes. And we'll actually start off by doing that with our scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions. We've got here our business travel emissions that over the last few months. And we've got here a 3.6 tons for July already in here, but we would like to capture, we know there's another trip, and we'd like to collect that trip's emissions, and we're going to do that with our business travel report. So basically what we have here, we can select to either do air travel, road travel, or rail travel. We can add this as a new trip, and then add into the trip for our travel from A to B. We set our distance. We know our distance. This was a flight over 750 kilometers, and we were 2 people traveling. Now this will automatically convert it into 649 kilograms. So this is done in our backend together with a partner that we work with that have these global standardized conversion tables. So we don't maintain those conversion tables, the professional that does that for us, a partner. So you are always sure that you know that the conversions that are done are all standard, adhere to global standards or generally accepted standards. We can submit this travel, and then if we go back to our environmental dashboard, we've added 0.6 tons or 650 kilograms. We'll see now the scope 3 is going back, is from 3.6 to 4.2 tons. Yeah, and now let's say we would actually also like to capture our waste, but our waste production, we want to capture differently this time. This time we actually want to capture it through a workflow. So we want to trigger a workflow that sends a report to all the people in the organization that are somehow involved with the production and the getting rid of and sorting of waste. You could have multiple production facilities or multiple offices, people sitting in different spaces, different offices all across the world, and you want your waste production to be collected from the individuals that all have access to the information where the waste is generated or sorted out. And in this case, we would like to use a report that there's, for example, a water use report, a water effluent report here. And we're obviously looking to have the same for our waste report. The difference now is our waste report, we have not migrated that yet. So in this case, we've had a client that we have already migrated their water use report. We have already migrated their water effluent report. They used to have it in Excel. The waste report is not done yet. And what we're going to do now, we're actually going to migrate this report in the next few minutes as well. The purpose here is just to show you how quick and easy it is to actually update and get going in the cloud and migrating reports like this here into Jedox. So this client here, he's got an emissions report that they use to capture the data in. They've got the water use report in form of cubic meters and the hazardous waste report. Now we would actually like to take this hazardous waste report and load it up. What I have already done in the database is create a dimension called hazardous waste. Now that's part of the data model. In the data model, we've got all these elements already set up in the database. I've also added a time dimension with these elements also to that database. So this table is now ready to be connected to the database. And with Jedox, you have a chance to actually grab your data straight from the database into an Excel. So obviously you can have your dashboards as a front end inside the browser, but actually you must imagine that in Jedox, you get the opportunity to also have your front end or use Excel as in front end to analyze and use your data and work with it. And that's what we're going to do now. You can see here all these values are 0, and we're going to connect this table to the database with our paste data function. Now this is a very clever function. I just need to make sure I'm connected. I'm selecting the right database and cube, and I say guess arguments and paste the function in here. Now it will paste a Palo data function, and this Palo data function, literally pulls out for the individual cell. If we look at here now you can see it's connected. It will pull out of the database that value that is relevant for this time period, for this input, and that company and actual. So it automatically detects the variables that are relevant for the address of where this data sits in the database cube. So we've got this data now in here, and it's connected straight to the database. We can actually now say, okay, we would like to not only see the actual values in the database, we'd actually also like to see the targeted value. But this is dead. I can't select here, and I want this to be a live filter. And for that, I add another fancy feature in Jedox, and say, okay, version, and in the version, I want to see the target. So I add the target in here. The moment I do that the first time around, you can see now here, the values have changed. The moment I do that the first time around, this thing becomes a live filter, and I can select to show actuals or previous year or strategic goals again. Okay, so what have we done? We've taken an old Excel report. We have, or I've done this before the demo, I created the database with these elements. Typically takes me 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes to do that. So I don't want to do it in this demo here. I then have connected the individual cells to the database and put one of these filters and made it go live. So what we want to do now is say, okay, we want to use this report now online. And for that, we use our publishing tool. As publishing tool, I obviously need to make sure I select the right location. And that is our environmental report, waste, and I export it and save it as waste. I'll replace it because I've done it in a previous demo. So I'm going to replace this report and it's done. Basically, if we go back into our dashboard or into our, application, we have and reload this waste report. There's our waste report now. And we can start working with it. We can even start entering numbers now in here. I could technically go and say, let me add a 500 in here. Now I'm doing it in Excel. So in Excel, you can also plan data. And if we go back into here and reload this one, you can see now the design is still different. We changed the design on these reports a little bit. And in this report still has this old design, but here's the 500. I'm just going to take it out again, but we would like to change this design. And we also, here we can select to show the actual values now. That point of view is live, but this one's dead. I can't select anything here. And I'd like to change this to become live as well. And for that, we're going to use our Excel Jedox designer. I'm going to switch over to our web application. You basically have the same in here, but this is more powerful because I, as a super admin, see more than a normal. This is the end user interface. This is what the end user see. I, as a power admin, power user, see these functions here on the right-hand side and on the left-hand side. And here I've got the designer. What we call it the designer. It's basically an Excel-style user interface in which you can upgrade and generate and build your reports and your dashboards. We've got you can use Canvas to create dashboards. In this case, it's a more simple report. We've got our waste report here, and if we look into it, you'll immediately recognize you're sitting on a very similar Excel, or it looks very Excel-like. It also behaves in the same way. I can choose my colors here, say, okay, I want it to be blue, and I want this to actually by standard be the actual figures, because remember, we want to collect actual values. And this one here, I also want to add that same paste element again. So the same functions you have in Excel with Jedox, it's the same what you get here in Jedox. So we want to paste that element. This time we choose the company and say, okay, now you can already see we filtered this by the total group, and we were working on this individual company here. In this case, the beer company APAC, and then we're back to our normal numbers. Basically, we're done. All we need to do now is save, close this, go back in here and say reload this, and immediately we're back to our standard that we used to from importing the other reports. And here you can see how quickly it is to take something in Excel, migrate it, make it go live, connect to the database, have real live numbers coming through, and actually designing it in a way that it looks very similar in Excel. But now what we want to do, we want to share this report with a colleague. And you need to just bear with me now because we've migrated this report into this section here. And I'm just quickly going to take this link and make sure that I have copy this link, go back into my workflow, and we're actually going to quickly adapt the workflow, because remember, we have just imported this report. So the workflow does not have the correct link in it yet. And I'm just going to use an existing workflow, and this time just put in the correct link. So there we go. Paste the link in here. Okay, now that link is in a report that we want to send out via email. Now we're going to start this workflow. And yeah, I'd just like you to imagine what this means for you and what's happening. Is that you can send out to any internal staff or external supply chain stakeholders like logistics or property managers to log your water, electricity, mileage, travel usage, and that every month or even every week if you want to. And this literally solves the biggest ESG problem because it is the data collection that sits across your entire organization, sits in many different heads, sometimes manually logged. And now I know that in this case here, Stephen got that for this particular area. He got an email and we are now in Stephen's inbox here. There you can see, he just received that email that we triggered. And ultimately also all the other people that are part of this collection process also received this same report that are all related to waste collection. You can see this was now less than a minute ago with a task to submit their waste, or in this case, Stephen's waste, and a single link to one report. So Stephen can't actually accidentally fill out a wrong report. He logs into his Jedox interface and can immediately start entering his information. Here he's got that same report. It's exactly the same report that we had a few minutes ago in here. And what we are going to do now is he knows now for July that there was 1,000 kilograms. And I just want to, before I actually log this, I want us to quickly go back to our environmental dashboard, just for you to show that the data comes through live. And remember, we said we're going to have a look at our waste production. We're at 6.3 tons. And we're going to add 1,000 now. So let's add 1,000, 1K, or we could write it like 1,000. These are typical short commands, very popular in Jedox. So we've logged 1,000. He's basically done. He can log out. You can see here he's logged in as a German. So all your users get different languages. They all have their own language that they can view. And if we now go into this report and recalculate it, you'll see this here has become 7.3 now. And ultimately, this saves you an incredible amount of time and effort, and this data comes in live through to your dashboards. Yeah, the same applies for your governance your governance dashboard, whether you collect data there through systems or through workflows like this, whether it's about work stoppages or employee training and compliance or corruption assessment or your supply chain stewardship for fair procurement. It always applies the same. You use these reports. And in social, if we have a look in social, for example, we have employee satisfaction score in this case, or training hours provided to employees, the numbers of injuries that we've had, and the different types of injuries. Here we've got 24 injuries. Here it's basically the same if you have an occupational health and safety standards you adhere to. For staff members in production facilities, for example, you will say, okay, I'll log here for the same. And this is exactly the same type of report that, let's say this is a fracture and we add 2 people. It's this exact same report again that you can use in a workflow and send out in a workflow. If we go back to our dashboard, obviously the same accounts here. We've got 2 more users logged now in here, it's 26. But we also have, for example, something like staff turnover. This could be more complex data in the background and sit in an existing pre-system. And there, for example, and that's why I quickly want to detour here into our integrator, because in our integrator we can basically connect to a host of different systems, and these systems could be, for example, Raidu for traveling. It could be SuccessFactors, Personio, or other HR systems where you have your data. And this will automate your data collection. And then you don't need to do anything because it will automatically schedule the collection of data on a daily basis, even an hourly basis if you want to. It includes data like travel data or HR specific data, so that in the end, the data that's collected through the integrator, you get the information straight on your dashboard without needing to do basically anything. So what have we done up until now? I've shown you our dashboards that really help you to collect the information, that show information. We've collected the information through different workbooks and reports. We've run a workflow. We've migrated a report from Excel into Jedox and used it in that same workflow within a very few minutes and started collecting data straight away. Ultimately, I believe creating the dashboards is the easy part. And however, Jedox is ultimately unique because it automatically does the conversions in form of greenhouse gases, for example, for you to up-to-date global standards, and ultimately it aligns with your financials. Importantly, if you back to our start, you can see all my own login screen. I've got tasks here that are also financial related, and it solves the most difficult task, and that of managing and automating the data collection. And this is where Jedox ultimately is really unique. And so, yeah, in this way, you may become over a short period of time a trailblazing ESG compliant or ESG business. And well, your business avoids obviously in that way some greenwashing, may become ecologically sustainable, socially just, governance compliant, and it gives your clients, employees, and investors also confidence in that you've got everything sorted. And yeah, that's it from my end. I'll hand back to my colleagues, Rachel,
Thank
for
you.
questions.
Thank you, Wolfgang, for so eloquently bringing us through the demo. You really brought up so many great points, and at the end you mentioned greenwashing, and this is definitely a great way to avoid that, because you obviously, in order to avoid greenwashing, you need to be accountable for your data. You need to have your data, and you need to be acting on that in a meaningful way. And to the point that we made earlier about sort of the difference between aspiration and accountability, this tool can really be that for your organization, and can really help shepherd you into that sort of meaningful ESG phase of your organization. I'm going to go ahead and flip back to JP to present the next couple of slides on planning and value creation.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
as we mentioned, what you've seen is part of one of many Jedox best practice accelerators, in this case for the domain of ESG. Nevertheless, it is complemented by other accelerators we sometimes already have established with existing customers, such as HR, finance, and sales. So the idea is really to adopt best practices right from the start and link them right from the start to other domains best practices, including all the capabilities. And the thing is, especially as our domain is the overall forecasting, planning, and reporting domain, how do we create value based on this overall exercise? And the thing is, if you perceive what you've already seen with Jedox planning for ESG and reporting, we do have those typical 3 steps. It's the collect and integrate topic we've seen. And the thing is, for most of our customers and prospects, this is the key exercise. We've already heard that 60% of the organizations out there still use a lot of tools out there and still use Excel. And we've seen how easily you can integrate specific KPIs, specific data gathering processes into Jedox, and not only report on these, but also plan and forecast. And we even got to the length of supporting those activities, for example, with AI-backed analysis capabilities. And lastly, but ultimately most important from a current point of view, is this reporting and share results aspect of our solution. And thing is, those are aspects not just of our ESG solution, but also of our Jedox platform, which is really a platform to integrate a lot of all the relevant data for the processes you want to use within your decision-making processes. So getting to this single source of truth, integrating all the ESG data where necessary and helpful, because that's what we see, that within the planning and forecasting, you need to integrate those numbers as well. Otherwise, it will become a silo, and silos are never efficient. And ultimately, really creating and adjusting already existing dashboards for existing customers, or blending. If you, for example, already have other heritage systems or even Excel within your financial department, for us, it's a typical exercise to blend what you are already doing with what ESG needs and requirements you have to fulfill and adhere to. And ultimately, if you blend those two aspects, you will get this single tool, and that's exactly the phrase that a customer of ours was using last week when visited with this, for them, new topic within Jedox of ESG. They really wanted this one tool that was already in place for their finance department to be spanning the ESG as well, including all the capabilities they already use with a set of cross-functional KPIs they're currently already using. They're already using it for HR. So a lot of KPIs could be, to some extent, already reutilized. And for them, it was just mainly redeciding on where to add or adjust their existing dashboards and link those to specific new job roles, such as, for example, their new head of ESG they had established. So for us, it's really getting you as an FP&A team, as a finance department, into the spot of addressing ESG as well, just as another exercise, as any other exercise you've done or are responsible for as of ever. Yeah. So from a value creation point of view, the interesting thing is how then those ESG aspects link into the finance world. And obviously, what I've already mentioned is the environmental aspect of the carbon offsets, and really, and specific companies already see this as a kind of penalty for not being capable to manage this. And this is something that where this relates already to, for example, other exercises. For example, EY is reflecting on this a little bit similar to tax being something that needs to be managed as a separate exercise to be optimized within a corporate organization. And with all the ideas of being capable to manage this at multiple levels within your organization, ultimately to avoid fees for specific violations. Next aspect, which is very crucial for another of our customers, and one prospect we are currently talking to, is this social aspect of really addressing younger generations of employees and reducing churn because of not only this loyalty from a customer's point of view, but also from a employee's point of view. And really, this was a quite simple exercise. They did an internal survey on how important and crucial this was for their new targeted group of future employees. And guess what? It already calculated in an ROE use case very nicely, just in terms of HR churn and acquisition aspects. So what I'm trying to say is ESG should be thought beyond just this tick in the box exercise. And although a lot of companies, and especially where you are very regulated industries, still have those governance aspects where the mandatory part of ticking this box is still very important. Nevertheless, this last part, where it is very important, should be addressed as early as possible, because it's in this case it's really something you perceive as an early adopter advantage in terms of getting selected and getting funded where you need those budgets, for example. And so that's ultimately something where the race is on, actually.
That's a great point, JP. I'm conscious that we're almost at the top of the hour, and there's one question that came in that I think, Wolfgang, I will kick to you. What is the greatest obstacle in establishing ESG compliance?
You're on mute.
Oh no, Wolfgang. We seem to have lost Wolfgang's audio, but it's all good. JP, do you want to take
what was the question? Pardon, sorry, I blanked out. What was the question?
Oh, you're back. Lovely.
Yeah.
What is the greatest obstacle in getting your audio to work on a webinar? I'm just kidding. The greatest obstacle in establishing ESG compliance?
I think in my mind, it still remains the data collection, making sure that your information that you collect, whether it's in a manufacturing facility where you have health and occupational accidents, for example, happening, how does that information get collected and then reported on and reports generated, so that the auditors who need to, where you, for example, need an ISO standard, for example, adhere to an ISO standard, where does the information come? It's usually manual logs, or somebody is running across your manufacturing facility to log fire hazards, or your fire equipment, fire doors, checking if everything's working. Where is that log? Your ISO standards require you to log that. Where is it? It's usually sitting manually, sometimes in a logbook or even in Excel. That collection is important. But then ultimately, I also think that the compliance standards are still concerning ESG in the early shoots, and we'll see more and more compliance requirements coming our way. So the big thing is actually less what do we have to comply with today, but what do we have to comply with in 3 years from, or 5 years, or 10 years from now. It's going to be exponentially more. And we will need to be able to have a system that helps us getting there. So that's, I think, those two things, what's happening now and what's coming, in my mind.
Absolutely, definitely. Well, just to close out for today, again, thank you all so much for joining us and for spending the time with us to learn more about ESG planning and reporting with Jedox. In conclusion, a few points, or at least my key takeaways. ESG and FP&A are very closely related, and the two functional areas really complement each other. And again, FP&A teams are really uniquely positioned to not only help organizations comply with requirements on a micro level, but also to help drive aggregate process on ESG on a macro level. And really considering also what is likely to happen in the future. For example, the KPMG research looking at 2030 can and does help us orient our behavior and priorities around ESG today. And lastly, as JP and Wolfgang both mentioned, this constantly changing regulatory environment for ESG, combined with an ESG data boom, demands an adaptable ESG solution that can integrate with individual point solutions and also perform predictive analysis to shape your strategy and planning. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you have a lovely rest of your day or afternoon or evening, depending on where in the world you are, and we'll catch you next time.